Joschka, would you be slightly more optimistic about the role Europe can play in the years to come? And would you start as a German and end up as a European in your comments?
Well, thank you very much. I think there is no reason for pessimism, but for realism. There is an important difference. I mean, to see the world as it is and draw the right consequences is the approach of a realist. To end up in a gloomy Untergang des Abendlandes mood is a pessimist. And compared to the past, I think our generation and the younger generation is not in a situation where we should be too pessimistic if you compare what happened in the 20th century. When we think back, as we're sitting here all together as Europeans, what our parents and grandparents had to go through, come on, we are in a very privileged situation. I think in the 21st century, the defining force will be the rise of the new powers, or even more, the desire of the people to get out of poverty and achieve the same living standard as we are used to it in the West, and in the meanwhile also in the more prosperous parts of emerging countries. And this means 7 billion people and more. And this means that with the present technologies and the kind of distribution, it's not going to happen. So a new industrial revolution, a so-called green revolution, will transform, together with the transformation of the global political system, the 21st century. And I think that's a very, very important and a positive development. Secondly, we are talking about redistribution of power when we look to the international system, a shift from the West to the East. The West has lost its monopole. Is that terrible? I think no, it's positive, because it's a consequence of globalization. And together with the first tendency I described, I think it will define the future. Will this be without contradictions? Definitely not. Conflicts? Yes. But I think the underlying element will be cooperation, because with 7 billion people, with the new communication reality, with the common challenges, cooperation based also on competition will be an important factor. The challenge for the Europeans will be whether we are open enough to reorganize ourselves, because even the big three, the two most powerful, France and the UK as permanent Security Council members, nuclear powers, Germany as the biggest economy with the biggest population. In the 21st century, we will be family-owned business, middle-sized, smaller-sized family-owned business. And if we want to have a strong voice, I don't believe that the traditional formula of the post-World War II will work any longer, because our American cousins will be drawn into the Pacific based on their interests, based on the challenges there, based also on growth expectations, and looking to the challenges we have, starting from the Balkans with our neighbor Russia, the states in between, the Middle East, the Mediterranean, Africa. I think the Europeans have to grow up very soon. Can we do that on the traditional 19th century national level? Definitely not. What is the answer? The answer are the United States of Europe. What does that mean? American system? No, definitely not. Why not? Because all our nations are much older than the US states in the founding period of the United States. Different languages, cultures, prejudices, traditions, whatever. So, but I think there is a way forward. What we see is now that the crisis is a good teacher. The crisis forced Sarkozy, Merkel, and all the others into a certain direction. They tried to get around about the painful question of sovereignty and legitimacy. But at the end, the financial crisis in Europe demonstrated that the core of the crisis is not a financial one. That's true for America. There is a financial crisis also in Europe. but the core is a governance crisis. We have a political crisis in Europe because we have a common currency in the EU 17, we have a common central bank, but what we don't have is a common treasury and a common government, and no common parliament, no common policy. And this must be changed. And I think the recent decisions on Friday was a huge step forward in that direction. It doesn't answer the question of the quick fixes to address the immediate crisis, but I think everything is now in place to move into a fiscal union. And from a German point of view, I must say there is no excuse any longer for a German government and the Bundesbank to say, no, we don't want to act, because all the stability mechanisms they were asking for are now in place. And therefore, I predict maybe within a few weeks we will have another serious crisis with a state of the periphery in the Mediterranean. But this time, I think preparations are made for a more serious firewall and more direct action. But there is still the open question that this step, which we have seen on Friday into a fiscal union, is step number one. There is the need for a step number two, the political union. Because at the end, if things get serious, you need the budgetarian right of the national parliaments also on the EU 17 plus. And I think this will lead to a new definition of political union, or not to a new definition, but to a real political union, which will be based, and you can see the structures today. The national parliaments and the national governments are the real player, not the Commission and not the European Parliament. I'm fine with that as a federalist, because I'm more interested in the outcome than in principles. And I must tell you, if you think about that the heads of states and government would be the European government, it would make sense. If we would have the national parliaments brought together with representatives for a Euro chamber, it would make extremely sense. You can always think that there is a role for the European Parliament as another chamber of the European structure, but that's beyond the horizon. What I see is the emergence of a new governance reality in Europe, and I think that there is also an opportunity to overcome that problems within the next 2 years. I think if we want to end the crisis, we have to address these governance issues. And reading the results of Friday, I'm pretty optimistic that we are moving in that direction. There's an urgent time pressure, because Europe cannot be consumed by its internal problems. Our neighborhood is a big challenge. And I must say our Singaporean friends, yes, maybe the Europeans are dispensable, maybe, but my answer is wait and see. I wouldn't be too astonished if at the end of the decade you would see who is dispensable and who is not dispensable. I promise you that I'm pretty optimistic about that Europe will play a very important role in the future of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well,